The objective of this tutorial is to explain how to create an asymmetric complex bottle inside the shape modeler of IC3D. So this is the bottle that we're trying to create, and we have some basic measurements that we've used to actually understand the bottle's shape. And from that we can see that there are two basic shapes that are used inside the model. We have one which is this rounded rectangle, and another which is the circle for the actual spout at the top. So, launching the shape modeler, we have imported two DXFs, one called a rounded rect and one called a circle 30, which will form the basis of this model. I'm going to place the rounded rect in at the bottom of the shape modeler, and because the top of it is going to be the circle, I'm going to set the circle in at the top. Now, for speed, we're going to turn off interim shapes, reduce our number of arc divisions down to just 5, and our horizontal divisions just to 200, just to give us a decent thing. So it'll look a little bit rougher in this view, but it will be quicker to use, and we can tidy it up at the end. We know this model is 262 millimeters high, so I'm going to set that into the model to start with. We also understand a few other basic measurements that we can use to ground ourselves. One is that the start of the neck, where it starts to come in at the top, is at around about 175 millimeters. So I'll place that into the model. We know that there will be a spout at the top, and we also now can start to put some detail into different sections. So starting with the base of the bottle, we know that this needs to be curved. So to achieve that, we would set the actual objects at the bottom, and we think that that curve is around about 5 millimeters. So I'm setting a second shape of the rounded rect at about 5 millimeters from the bottom. And then making sure these are linked so that it reduces symmetrically, we will just move in the bottom, and that actually creates a smaller shape underneath. By selecting the bottom shape, we can now actually change that to have a curve on it. And we can see the effect is immediately to give us a curved, rounded bottom to the bottle. Now, starting to work on the upper measurements, we need a few more rounded rects in there, one for each level of the actual indentation at the top. Let's remind ourselves what the model looks like. Rounded at the bottom, rounded, rounded, rounded. So we need 1, 2, and a third one where we're going to blend up into the neck. So we've added our 3 up here, and if I zoom in on that area, we can start to see how we might form those into actual shapes. Now you can do these with very accurate measurements. For the moment I'm just going to drag these across, but we know that this neck here to here is almost a straight line, so we can kind of guess where those points and measurements are going to come. And that looks just about right there. We can adjust it further as we go along. So we're going to take each of these points and turn them into an actual arc. This one looks like it needs just a bit more space. On this point, we're going to turn that one into an arc. On this point, we're going to turn this one into an arc. It's a little bit big. And we can see the shape starting to develop on the top there. and keep going until we think we've formed all of the arcs that we need. And then the top arc is going to actually come in and start to form the neck of the bottle, which we know is at 30. If we want to actually make sure these actually stay fairly symmetrical, we can just move them with the arrow pointers at the side. And we have a smaller increments measurement here, which is used to actually just move them by very small amounts. So we can start to see that coming together. The shape of the neck looks a little bit odd at the moment, but that's because we haven't got interim shapes turned on. So as we turn on interim shapes, we can see that that firms up the modelling of the neck quite a bit nicer, and it actually creates firm interims between those 2 points. Now we need to deal with the top of the bottle. So a couple of things that we know about the top of the bottle is that the lid has a slight indentation at the top. So we'll put in a thing to handle that. Again, just using our things that we have at this available to us, which is just the same circle. Now I actually have a cog shape, and this also I created for another model that I was doing, but it's very handy for doing the corrugated section around the top of the lid here. So I'm going to add a couple of those in, like so. Now, we know that both of those are smaller because they're part of another model, but I can select them both and just put in their new size. Always check that your link for the width and height are together, otherwise you might produce some wrong results. And we'll just stabilize those at the top and the bottom with a couple of circles to bring them back to the original shapes. So as I start to move in on that particular section, we can start to see we've got some information to work with. So now I use my smaller increments and I go up to the top, and we know the cap actually uses a small indentation at the top to give it a sort of smoother shape. So come back off the small ones and we're moving quite a bit at the top, and then we can see the indentation happening. Now if we need to, we could put an arc on that, or it depends what we actually want to achieve with it. So if we wanted to get it nice and smooth, there we go, we can create the top of the cap like that. Now a couple of areas in here need to show some of the screw threads, so for that we might use a couple more of these, and we can use those in a way where we indent one of them. Again, using the linked width and height, we can move that in. Perhaps I will put a couple more circles into that just to play around with. We can always take them out if we have too many. And now we start to put the next row in. And again, we're starting to get a little bit needing smaller movements, so I'll just do this with the smaller increments turned on. And then we can start to see some sort of shape coming in and we can refine these as much as we need to. So keep moving these in until they're dramatic enough. If we see that that's like 26, so we can put 26 on this one to directly match it up, and perhaps a little bit down on the actual positioning to make that gap a little bit wider. Okay, so now we can start to look at the actual thread positioning. So we'll start to bring that up. For the moment, I'll just take off the smaller increments so we can move a bit quicker. And the thread actually sticks out just a little bit, so we'll make that slightly wider. And as we pan down the model here, we can also bring in this one, which is again slightly wider. Bring that up to the top to create the size of the thread that we actually want. That's probably about it. And bring this one in to sort of consolidate it. So there we have the top of the bottle done, and then there's the screw cap thread is the last sort of part to put in, which needs a couple of positioned options. And again, we can move those very quickly into place. Probably actually need another one in there just to indent it. Now we can see the actual position we're adjusting here, and we can adjust that for the fineness of what we actually want to achieve on it. So it might be that we need to just stick one more of these in here, and what we're actually going to do with that is just move it out ever so slightly, so smaller increments on, and we'll just make it half a mil out further, and then we can start to see the actual bottle head. Now we can actually split the bottle at this point and make one bit into the actual cap and one bit into the actual bottle, but in all that pretty much concludes the bottle as we would do it. Now further improvements is keeping interim shapes on, make our arcs smoother by adding 10 of those. So each arc will now have 10 dividing points, and we may put this up to 500 smoothing to get a perfectly smooth model. And that concludes the demo on how to produce an asymmetric bottle. And you can see when we add it into the world, here we have our bottle. Now what we can now do is perhaps put some artwork on it using shrink. You know, the height there is a 180. 180, and start the simulation to shrink it onto the bottle and stop it. And now we have a platform to lay our artwork on. And that concludes the demo on creating complex asymmetric bottles.